listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Hello there. In this episode, we're going to focus on the speaking. We're going to look at a couple of expressions, a couple of expressions that we can use in the speaking part. These expressions, they will get gradually more difficult, starting off with some easy ones, which you can use in part one. Expressions to do with the places, to do with characters, to do with people. And then we're going to go into expressions that you could use more for task 2 and task 3. And the bonus thing with this podcast and these expressions is that they're all used with. Okay, so they're all used with the preposition with the word with. And this makes it extremely easy to memorize them, because now you're not going to get mixed up with by, with from, with to. It's all of them are with. Now, here's another tip. These expressions, okay, there's maybe about, I can't remember, 7 of them. But what I want to say is that it's important that you acknowledge that mastery is about doing, in this case, 7 things right 5,000 times, not doing 5,000 things 3 times. Okay? So what I'm saying is that it's better to learn a few and repeat them constantly until we get full control of them, rather than trying to squeeze in about 20 or 30 all in random order and not being able to remember hardly any of them, or even just remembering a few but jumbled up. Now, another tip for helping you to remember them is that if you personalize them afterwards, so I will tell you the expression, I'll give you the examples, then I want you to pause the recording and try and think of 3 expressions where you could use that in your own personal life. Okay, and this will help you to remember it because you're personalizing it and it becomes something that's useful to you. And the 2 more tips for helping you learn them. Second tip is to write it down on a piece of paper and put it in your pocket and carry that piece of paper around with you for the rest of the day. Sounds a bit crazy, but every time you go into your pocket, you might think, what's that? Pull it out, look at it, read it, and it'll be easier for you to remember to use it. Okay, try and use it at least 3 or 4 times today, that expression. Okay, and I've done this a few times when I've been learning languages, and it definitely works. Now, I think that's all of the expressions I wanted, all of the tips. Yeah, so let's get on with it. The first one is teeming with. Teeming with. And that just means to be full of. Okay, teeming with. I'll give you a few examples. My hometown, Manchester, is teeming with football fans. Okay, my favourite place in the world is teeming with wildlife. All right, the city centre of my country is teeming with shops. Now, these are quite useful ones because they're rather generic, and you can take these and you can apply them to your own city. So, for example, maybe you're from Delhi, and you could say the city centre of my country, Delhi, the city centre of my country's capital, Delhi, is teeming with shops, is teeming with merchants, is teeming with, taxis. Okay? And very easy to use, and just pick up a few points there just for using some vocabulary, some new vocabulary. Now, my friend's hometown, Liverpool, is teeming with smelly football fans, you could also say. Okay, so now I want you to stop the recording, pause it, and give me 3 examples of something that you could use. And this is just going to help you because in task 1, the examiner wants to know about you, where you're from, your hometown, your home country, and this is an easy expression to get your exam off to the best start possible. Okay? Now the next one, covered with. Covered with. So we use covered with when we want to say to show that it's an unusual amount of something on top of something else. Okay? So my father's village is on a hill covered with trees. Quite easy. In winter, my village was routinely covered with straw because it was really near some stables. What could you use covered with? And what expressions could you use that? Pause the recording. Try and write down 3 or 4. Okay, is your city covered with smog? Is it covered with snow? So pause it down. You can pause the recording and write them down. Now, and a very popular topic, a very common topic, is also to talk about people and characters. So if we're talking about people or characters, let's try and use some phrasal verbs, and let's try and improve our vocabulary and make it rich. And what we could do is we could use an expression called hit it off with. Okay, hit it off with somebody. And that just basically means to get on well with. Usually, like in the first instance that you've met them. Okay, so we could say, I hit it off with my tutor from day one. He's really compassionate and intelligent. Yep. My 2 friends hit it off with each other from the first time they met. Yeah. Our whole class hit it off with each other from the first meeting. We all have the same sense of humour. So, who have you hit it off with recently? Was it a colleague? Was it an uncle? Try and think of some examples and write down, or even say, if you're doing this podcast with a friend, just try and say 3 examples. Yesterday I really hit it off with the new kid in the classroom, or whatever. Next one, change places with someone. Now, I hope you can realize that these is gradually getting a little bit longer. Okay, and usually when it's longer, it's a bit more trickier to learn. So I would recommend mastering those first ones and then moving on to these ones. And it's getting progressively more difficult. So change places with someone. This means to exchange a position, exchange location. Let me give you an example. So Dave has a much better contract, but I wouldn't change places with him for all the money in the world. Okay. Scottish people have free medical care, but I would never change places with them. And what I'm trying to say there is that although they have free medical care, I would still rather be English. Okay, these are just hypothetical examples, by the way. I don't really mind. Anyway, my brother is a dentist and has flexible working conditions. I think I'd change places with him tomorrow if I could. So I've just used the reverse here, and I'd say, like, if I had the opportunity, I would definitely take my brother's position as a dentist, if he were a dentist. So just hypothetically again. So my brother is a dentist and has flexible working conditions. I think I'd change places with him tomorrow if I could. Yeah? Can you see how we're using this expression? So try and think of some instances where you would change places with somebody. Maybe someone's got a very good job, or they're doing a very easy university course, or I don't know, maybe they won the lottery and you change places with them tomorrow. Yeah? So very useful expression, and it's very versatile. You can use that for people, for places, and once again, maybe a task 1, possibly a task 3 as well. Now, one of the more difficult ones, break with tradition, to do something different from what's usually done. Now, this is very useful because near the end of the exam, the examiner may probably test your use of the tenses by asking questions about changes in time. And you want to make sure that not only are you recognizing the tense and you're replying in the right tense, but you're also using some of these more advanced expressions which are going to show your control of the language. So here's one: to break with tradition. I'll give you some examples. I don't usually break with tradition, but using coal is destroying our atmosphere. Yeah? So maybe the examiner would say, I don't know, what are your views on global warming and pollution? Okay? So something like that would be fine, and then you just carry on and you develop your answer in the same way that you would write a paragraph. Maybe you give in a small introduction, then you go into your body, and then to conclude you could just repeat the question but as an answer and say, and that's my opinion about climate change and air pollution. Yep. And we're just closing, and it's a signal to the examiner that that's your answer and you've finished. Another example: I think leaving home at such an early age is definitely breaking with the tradition of my country. So maybe the examiner said, nowadays, is it common for young people in your country to leave their parents or to live away from home? You could say, I think leaving home at such an early age is definitely breaking with the tradition of my country. This is because blah, blah, blah. Okay? Another example. Let's see. I broke with the tradition of my family and decided to study a subject that was not related to law. Okay? Law being L-A-W, like legislation, legal, lawyers, solicitors, courts and judges, all this kind of stuff. So here, maybe it's a question for task 1. Why did you decide to study medicine? I broke with the tradition of my family and decided to study a subject that was not related to law. Okay, or I decided to study medicine because I wanted to break with the tradition of my family and not study something related to law. Okay, now when did you break with tradition? Try and think of about 5 examples. This will help you remember the phrase. And finally, we've got killing 2 birds with 1 stone. This is quite an easy idiomatic expression. It's quite simple to understand. It's doing 2 things simultaneously and solving 2 problems using the same solution. So you could say, if the examiner says, why did you decide to stay in your home city? You could say, well, I decided to stay in my home city because the university had the course I wanted, and I could live with my family. So I was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Quite easy, yeah? Maybe it's a question. Maybe you get a question about public transport, and the examiner is asking you what's your views about public transport. You could just say, I guess with public transport they kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They reduce traffic congestion and improve air quality. Okay, here I'm referring to the government. Okay, so I guess with public transport they kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They reduce traffic congestion and improve air quality. Okay, I'll give you one last expression, one last example, and then we're done. So by studying English while drinking vodka, you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone because you're learning and getting ready to party. Okay? No, just joking, don't do that. But that's a valid... I wouldn't use that sentence either in the speaking, but there's just an example. Just doing 2 things simultaneously or solving 2 problems with the same solution. Okay, now if you're still a little bit worried about your speaking, perhaps you want to check out the Speaking with Confidence course. That's available at sentenceguide.com. You get some feedback, you can use some more, you get the chance to learn more expressions, you get the chance to use them in your speaking, and you also get you get the chance to use them in your speaking exam, and you get feedback on whether you've used those expressions correctly. Okay, so it's like the finishing part. So if you've done all these exercises and then you want to find out if you've actually done them correctly, then Speaking Confidence course is that type of course where you can get feedback for your improvement. Okay, now if you've got any questions, shoot me an email, and remember what I said before. Use those expressions, try to remember them. You've got killing two birds with one stone, you've got break with tradition, you've got changing places with someone, hit it off with someone, covered with, and teaming with. Alright, so use them, listen to the podcast a few times, get into the habit of remembering them, get into the habit of using them, and try and pull them out in the exam as well. Pick up those points. And if you failed the exam before, it's either time to get help or double up with your studying. And it's not impossible. You can do it. You've learnt your own language. It's just a case of persistence, pushing on and going for it and taking massive action. All right, that's all for today. Have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you've got any suggestions, just send me an email. I'd be more than happy to listen and possibly incorporate them into the next podcast. Have a good day.